beginning, God said, Brian Light speaking. Can I help you, sir, ma'am?
Hi, Warrior.
Hello?
You and your friends. Your precious life. You can't save them all.
Watch us. In the beginning.
All right, everybody. Welcome. Let's see. Oops. Oh. What happened? Uh-oh. Sorry, Crystal. I don't know what happened. I'll get you back up in a minute. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Cool. Oh, there's Henry. Okay.
I am.
Hey.
Got off.
Yeah. Hey, oh man, where'd Crystal go? Oh, there she is. Hey.
Still got pushed back down into the audience, I think. It looks like we're having some technical difficulties for sure.
Yeah. Let's see.
Hello, Ron. I'm sorry, what we got going on here?
Okay. Hey, everybody. Hey, Crystal, send a raise hand so I can bring you back up on stage. Oh, there we go. There we go. All right.
Yep, I'm back up.
Okay. I don't know what happened. That was crazy. The first time, hey, I don't know. It's kind of weird. But, welcome to the show, everybody. What y'all think? Were y'all able to hear the beginning of the show?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wasn't. I just got in.
Were you able to hear it, Henry?
Yeah, I mean, I was able to hear broken up pieces of it, but I think it really is about trying to. It's just the messaging behind it. I think you're talking about the core values that you have out there as a whole.
Yeah. I'll play it again at the end of the show, so that way everybody can hear it.
Yeah, good.
Awesome.
So yeah, everybody. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I don't know how some of that stuff happened, but it happens. But welcome to Our Light, which for the next hour I'll discuss with my special guest and allow some of y'all to come up on the stage and explain to us, what is your light in your life? What keeps you getting up out of bed every morning? What keeps you moving forward? So that way others can be like, wow, yeah, I'm not alone. I have light in my life. And because one of the things, actually I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2 of them are ferrets, are pet ferrets. Besides the wife and the son, are my lights in my life. they're the reason why I get up every morning, every day, and talk to myself, give myself kudos and, for getting up in the morning and facing another day, because even, it's like the old sailor saying, even though there's a storm on the horizon, once you push through the storm, there is light, and, that's probably one of the reasons why, we use the lighthouse in the company logo is because of that. Because initially I wanted to join the Navy when I was a child, and that the lighthouse has always been a representation for sailors, throughout well over 150 years, especially in America, longer in other countries, because it's always been a way to illuminate the path, to keep them from crashing their ships into the rocks of, the coastline, and so that's part of my light, is family and our pet ferrets. There's always light out there. Nobody is ever alone. You may think that you're alone, but you're not. And just from just from looking at the people that have followed the wife's company version of our company on TikTok, and from here on LinkedIn, what I've seen over the past, because I started posting once a day, at least, on September 1st of last year. And, it was kind of a rocky start, but I pushed through it, because I knew there was a light at the end of the tunnel, that there would be hope, that there was hope, because I was seeing people, that I wasn't even following yet, talk about, hey, I just got a new job, and I was like, sweet, this is awesome, and so that's where a lot of this comes from, is to show people that there is always a better way. There's always another way. To sit there and think that you don't have any worth or no value, or people are always, telling you that, how can I put this? That you're doing it wrong. There are a lot of people out there that'll tell you you're doing it wrong. But, yeah, you're doing it wrong according to the way they did it, but everybody's life is different. And we all follow a path. But we need people to be encouraging, and that's the reason why I asked Crystal and Henry here on the show, as my first two guests, because they got the Light Warrior path down to a T. Because I'm telling you, if y'all ain't following them or connected with them, you need to, because they bring the light every day. They're always positive. They're always telling people, hey, we understand you're having problems, but this is what we've done in our life. Don't do as we say, but try and do as we've done according to what's involved in your life, so that way you can get to where you need to go, to where you don't feel hopeless, you don't feel you're alone, because you're not. Nobody on this planet, there's over 7 billion of us. Nobody, and I will say this till the day I die, nobody should ever feel alone with this many people on the planet. How many people on the moon? Oh yeah, that's right. None. So we're all here on Earth, planet Earth, and so, this really is a heartfelt mission of mine because, as Henry and Crystal can tell you, being prior service, there's a lot of our brothers and sisters that come this Memorial Day. We're gonna have to memorialize them because they're not here with us anymore because they felt that they couldn't win, that they were alone, and I can't do it no more, and I hope and pray y'all can't do it anymore, because for every light that gets extinguished by a person's own hand, to me, that's a failure of all of us. 7 billion of us. We've all let that person down. And we can't do it no more. We can't do it no more and run around talking about, this, that, and the other, and I got this, and I got that. Okay, you got your life established. Now, how about you pay it forward, because you didn't do that all by yourself. And that's the reason why, whenever I talk about this, I talk about it's not about it's not about me. It's all about us, and it's all about we. Because nobody became successful on their own. They had people that helped them out. They had people that were there for them. Whether it be family, friends, they found that one person that said, hey, I like your idea. Here's $1 million. Unless you went and robbed a bank, hey, well, even then you had a crew because, the days of, one person robbing banks, that's like way back in old West days. Nobody does that anymore. But yeah, I'm so happy that all y'all showed up today, because this is we need to talk about this. We need to talk about suicide. And we need to talk about bullying too, because what does bullying do? How many children have killed themselves because they were bullied? And where does bullying start from? Starts in the home. So, if we can reach out to our fellow parents, and say, hey, I seen your kid when I went to pick my kid up, and he walked up behind another kid and popped him on the back of the head. That's not right. We need to be better stewards, because that's what we are. We're stewards of humanity. And we all, and everybody has value, everybody has worth, and everybody has the ability to become better than they were the day before. And okay, well, that's no, I'm not crying. Old Sarge don't cry. That's just dust in my eye. Yeah. But yeah, let's start with my first guest. Beautiful woman, great heart. Crystal Ortega, in fact, she was probably one of the first people that saw one of my posts way back in September, and she reached out to me for a connection request. And it was awesome, because I was like, well, nobody's gonna like this post, but she did. She liked it. She saw the insight into it. So without further ado, let's invite Crystal Ortega to introduce herself to y'all.
Hi, everybody. I am Crystal Ortega, and Brian, back in September, it was a very heartfelt post, and I did reach out to you. And even if you're crying, I'm crying, so don't you start that. But at any rate, um, where do I start? A little bit about myself. Way back when, if we're talking about a mentor, I think I was around 12, I did have somebody I worked with who said to me, never be part of the problem, always be part of the solution. And I think I was around 12. And that stuck with me my whole life. So if we want to talk about somebody who just kind of ingrained that in my head, that's kind of probably where my rock came from. And his name was Bob Bannett, and to this day we are still in touch, and I am forever grateful to him for that, because at the time when you think of a 12-year-old, you're barely like out of elementary school going into middle school, I think, sixth grade-ish.
Yeah.
And he kind of just took me under his wing. I did not work for him my whole life. We do not work together now, but it's something that just said, hey, I care. And there's always teachers and all those other things, but my passion has always been about people. And it came well before then, but that was something that I just say, you know what? Here's an adult who said, I'm going to take you under my wing, and I'm going to just shape and mold you. And and then going forward in that, I do have a passion for people. I coach high school boys soccer. I didn't start there. I coached younger kids. I've been doing that since high school. I've worked in business, public service. I serve on a lot of health and wellness boards, and so I get really involved in my community. And just like you said, nobody should ever feel alone. And when we talk about those things, it's really a matter of being open with people and embracing and meeting people where they are. Because if we don't do those things and we do it with judgment, nobody's going to be open, including myself, because I'm an imperfect person. We all are,
Sure.
and we have to just meet someone where they are. Yeah. And let people know, hey, I am here. If you place your hand on somebody's shoulder and say, hey, how are you today? Whatever it is, because I think different things work for different people, and you just have to be open to that. So that's something that's important for me.
Yeah.
And I've learned that through my dad, because my dad is somebody, if nobody ever asked him, I don't think he would be here right now as a veteran from the Army.
Yeah.
We go that route. So that's just kind of a short, quick thing. If we want to, kind of get into some more of that, I'm more than happy to do that. But I've learned a lot from coaching, even kids,
Yeah.
You have to kind of know when to say, hey, take a break, or what's going on at home. I've always had an open household. My son knows, his friends know, we're second parents, their parents are second parents. Hey, if you can't say something to me, say it to your own parent. It's kind of that community thing.
Yeah.
And as adults, we do have to do the same thing for each other, because nobody is alone.
Yep.
Even if we feel that way.
Very true.
So it's kind of, I go back to that, don't be part of the problem, be part of the solution. And that is something that's so important when we talk about bullying or suicide or depression, anxiety, all of those things. And we have all the catchphrases, but we have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And not say, oh, I'm fine all the time, because we're not fine all the time. We're people, we're human, and we're going to have moments of needing to lean in or needing to lean on someone else. And for me, my son has taught me a lot, especially, he was in high school when the whole world just kind of shut down.
Yeah.
So imagine being 16, we're adults, we handle things differently, and having the, feel that carpet being ripped out from under you.
Oh, yeah.
And for him, he kind of went through some of that stuff where I thought, okay, my kid is going to actually not be here. And he is, thankfully, but, so it's no different than an adult. But having that let's find a solution attitude was something that really kind of helped him, and then he's out helping other people. Yep. So he has kind of that mindset too.
Yep.
It's just like his grandpa, and keeps it in, and he's like, here it goes. So, at any rate, that is just a little bit about me. So we can kind of let Henry go if you want, or
Okay.
we can discuss some of those things.
All right, and let's welcome Mr. Henry Miller. Henry Miller has been in my shoes as far as being a veteran also. So he kind of understands the mindset of his fellow veterans. It's been rough, ever since they started the 22 is 22 too many. And I talked to Henry, and I told him, I told him one day, I said, they're talking about raising that to 25 a day, and his response was, like the way I feel, we can't let that happen. We can't, and he's a good, heartfelt man, so let's welcome Henry Miller. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Henry.
Hey, Brian, thanks for having me here today. I
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate it. It's a good opportunity, especially when it's right in the middle of lunchtime, so maybe people in or while they're working, they can just kind of listen in.
Mm-hmm.
Brian and I think we did meet a while back, and I like what you're about is as far as trying to look at being part of the solution. I think Crystal kind of talked a little bit about this too. Is it's easy to judge somebody. It's easy to judge somebody, especially when you're not in their shoes, and it's really, it's hard in general, because we're all people, we all make mistakes, we all, are out living life. But I will say that, the mission behind that is to help people and be part of that solution of giving people, just resources available. Being there to just listen sometimes makes the world a difference, right?
Yeah, true.
And what I just know to be true is, from being in the military is we do teamwork. We preach teamwork. We work together. We always say you're never alone, right?
Yep.
And it's true because you've always got somebody to lean on next to you. And I do think when service members, when you leave the military, especially if you've done a decade, 2 decades, I think the longer you're in, it definitely is a little harder.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're used to, right? And when you transition out, you do realize that, that level of trust and teamwork is the companies that do that are phenomenal. The companies that can do that are great.
Yeah.
But you miss that and you lose that, right? And to some degree, that's part of your identity, and that's part of why I think that people struggle is you have to be able to sort of shed parts of that, take the lessons you learned. And then also sort of get help too, seek help for things that may have occurred while you were in service. And I recommend anybody, anybody who ever has dealt with any kind of trauma or anything that they've experienced, I always get help. I always tell anybody the hardest part about doing that is taking that first step and talking
True.
to somebody about it or a professional about it. But once you do that, I think when you start seeing results and you start seeing how you're able to better manage, that you're going to become a better version of yourself, And you talk about who's your light on your path and that sort of thing,
Yeah.
For me, it's my family, my dogs. I'm a dog lover for sure, and it's the community that we've built here on LinkedIn. There's a lot of people LinkedIn here that have just really, they push my thinking, the bounds of my thinking, opportunities galore. But at the end of the day, I've made a lot of connections, human connections, where we're able to have a coffee chat and just chat about life or chat about work or chat about, things that are going on. And you'd be surprised at what difference that makes to people in general.
Oh, yeah.
Is what I've always found.
Yep.
World of difference.
Yep, that's true.
And sometimes you need that push.
Yeah, because everybody, the main thing that humans, and I've learned this throughout a number of years. Seriously,
Many.
over 50, yeah, over 50 years now. That most people just want to be heard. You know, they want to be heard and they want to be respected, and you know, because you know we are, after all, human. So everybody has value, everybody has worth, everybody should be respected because we are human. You know, and
Right.
you know, and it's just it's amazing how, you know, smiling at someone, like, you know, like yesterday I went to the grocery store. I smiled at someone who looked, you know, didn't look desperately sad, but they didn't look too happy. And I smiled at them. They smiled back. And then when I got around to the cash registers, they were going past the cash registers to the other side of the store. They smiled at 3 people. 3 people. Dude, that's awesome. That's power. You know.
It absolutely is, you know, like it can change somebody's wholly day, right? You know, I always say, like, you know, a smile on your face and just asking somebody how they're doing, you know, even if it's just even if you're just getting a cup of coffee, right?
Yep.
It's like, hey, how are you? You know, that can change their perspective on the whole day, because they're not used to just having somebody do that. They're just used to people coming in, asking for something transactionally, walking through the day.
Yeah.
And you just never know what people are dealing with day to day, you know? I mean, people... Yeah, I always go back to, like, social media sometimes. It's like you see people online, you see them on LinkedIn, you see them on TikTok, wherever,
Yeah.
and you see them as a success, right? Like, you see them as, like, wow, look what they've accomplished, or look at their following, or look at all the jobs they've had, or look at all the content. Man, they're just doing really well. But you never know what that person's going through, you know, behind
Sure.
that, right? Like,
Yeah.
they push themselves each day maybe to do those things, but you never know what's going on. So, I mean, I always try to tell people, you know, I know it sounds cliche to say, you know, be kind, but I'm like, you know, it costs you nothing to be nice to people day to day. It costs you very, very little at all
Yep.
time to ask somebody how they're doing, whether it's a coworker, somebody on LinkedIn you haven't heard from in a while, just checking in, you know. And I have people I check in on if I don't see them online for a while. I'm like, hey, how's it going? What's going on? I hadn't seen you around in a while, you know. And I think if more people just did that reach out, you know, you'd be surprised at the difference that you make in people's lives.
Oh yeah, because just saying, just, you know, like waking up in the morning and looking at the people in your household and just saying, I love you. How many seconds did that take? 1.5, 2 seconds? It's not a lot of time, but it can mean the world of difference. You know, it's so much power in the light. You know, everybody, well, it's, you know, the light is power. It's love. It's kindness. It's being respectful. You know, treating everybody that, you know, has, you know, that they have value and they have worth. You know, whether you know you become successful or not. You know, as long as there are people always in your corner, and there's always people in your corner, you know, and you know, there for a while, you know, I had my own run-in with the darkness, believe it or not. This is many years ago, and you know, the phone rang, and it was my mom. And yeah, so, you know, my mom, and I didn't realize it because I was so far in the abyss, you know, that I couldn't see straight. But that day when my mom called me, you know, that's when I realized that my mom has always been my light. You know, and that's the reason why that's one of the reasons why I'm here talking to y'all today, because my mom, you know. And then after that, you know, it just started, you know, you know, everything started getting brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter, and then, You know, met my wife. You know, and if you would have asked me 14 years ago, you're gonna get married and you're gonna have 50 kids. Well, not the 50 kids part, but I did get married because I never thought I would. You know, and then our son was born, and it's like, he's my miracle baby because I didn't think I'd ever have kids. I didn't think anything would ever happen. You know, so I know it was destiny. Because there's a put a little religion on y'all. There is a part where he does state in the Bible, that he has a plan for all of us. And
I know the plans I have for you. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you.
Yes. Yep. And I feel that the reason why it took me until I was 42, 41, I think 42 or 41 before I got married is because he knew that, for one, I wasn't ready. I still had growing to do. I still had to evolve. Like I've posted before, on here, people talk about being a good human, and I say no. No, those words have no meaning anymore. They've been thrown around too much. People talk about, well, we need to evolve. We need to evolve as humans. We need to be, okay, well, if we're going to evolve as humans, let's go from being a good human and evolving into a great human, and show, the world that there is light, that darkness does not reign, that we are the warriors of that light, and that we can defeat the darkness. And I've been blessed,
I think it's important to remind people, Brian, I really think it is important to remind people, that, when you talk about being a good person and a great person, that think about that, right? Like that goes back to like improving yourself 1% every day.
Yep.
Being grateful for the things you have, even if you're striving for other goals and that sort of stuff. So it kind of lends into that, and as well as no matter what you believe or don't believe, at the end of the day, I think everybody agrees that being respectful to people, being positive towards people, and trying to help people reach their max potential is what everybody really wants. People want to be seen and heard.
Yep.
And I really think that letting them know that what they're going through is there. I always say, when you deal with trauma, trauma is in itself. Everybody's trauma is different, right? Like comparing trauma is the worst thing you could ever do because there's just really there's no gauge to determine what it's person by person, thing by thing that happens to you in life. And when you look at it from that lens, you go, what you're going through, other people are too. So if we can get people to kind of share more, be vulnerable in that kind of sense, it allows people to realize that they're not alone, that even people that they view as being super successful, are struggling with something, internally, externally. That's why when you talked about the military members and 22 lives a day, moving to 25, that number's high. It's really high. I mean, when you really think about that, it's when people feel like they just don't have an option. Nobody understands what they're going through. So it's like through storytelling, through being vulnerable, you're giving those people, a power and a lens to be able to sort of open up, and go, oh, maybe I can share with people. I can share my story. Maybe I can actually help somebody too that's going through the same thing as me. A lot of people on LinkedIn do it really, really well. There's some phenomenal people out there that document their struggles with their struggles, with personal stuff. And it's really interesting to watch because those people to me are like showing other people truthfully that, being authentic and being real, really resonates with people in general. So, and there's a lot of people out there like that. I mean, I can name you dozens of them that lead with that kind of vulnerability. I mean, you've got your Melissa Houston's out there, you got your Jules McVeigh out there, that are just, they're always being honest, and they're always who they are, and they show up as that, and it shows, especially on LinkedIn, where it's more of a professional but personal community, and we have coffee chats and we get to know each other. Sustaining a brand or being a personal brand over time, people just know who you are. It's just over time they can kind of see what you're about, like what you believe, that sort of thing. And I think we should all pull together as a community